When I was 12 years old, my family lived in a remote barrio in Mindanao. Our house stood at the very edge of our village, where the forest pressed close and thick. The nearest neighbor was a 10-minute walk through darkness, a distance that felt like miles when you were alone. Our home was typical of rural Philippines. Bamboo walls held together with rattan, wooden beams overhead that creaked in the wind, and an earthen floor that turned to mud when the rains came. But what I remember most were the holes, hundreds of tiny gaps between the bamboo slats, spaces where the material had warped or split, creating countless little windows into the darkness outside. During the day, slivers of sunlight would pierce through like golden needles. But at night, those holes became eyes, watching, waiting. 6 of us shared a single bedroom. My parents, my 4 siblings, and me, all crowded together on woven mats that smelled of sun and sweat. We had no door, just a tattered curtain hanging from the frame, offering the thinnest illusion of privacy. The light switch for the entire house was mounted right there on that bedroom doorframe, a detail that would come to haunt me. Even at that young age, I was different from other children. While they treasured sleep and dreaded school, I craved the emptiness of early morning. I loved arriving at school before anyone else, before the chaos of children's voices, before the suffocating heat of midday trapped you indoors. Just silence, pure, untainted silence, where I could lose myself in books, where the words on the page were the only voices I needed to hear. That's why I woke at 4 in the morning every day. In the absolute darkness before dawn, I would prepare my things, cook rice for my family, and ready myself for that perfect solitude waiting for me in the empty schoolhouse. But on this particular morning, something was different. The moment I opened my eyes in the darkness, my heart was already racing, not the gentle acceleration of waking, but a violent hammering against my ribcage, as if my body knew something my mind hadn't yet grasped. I lay there for a moment, listening to the breathing of my sleeping family, trying to understand this sudden terror that had seized me. I forced myself to move, struck a match, lit our small kerosene lamp. The warm glow pushed back the darkness, but not completely. Never completely. Through all those holes in the bamboo walls, the night stared back at me. I brushed my teeth using water from our clay pot. My hands were trembling for no reason I could name. Every sound seemed amplified. The scrape of my feet on the floor, the splash of water, my own breathing. And underneath it all, a feeling I couldn't shake. I was being watched. Our house was so small, so fragile. Those bamboo walls might as well have been paper. Anything could see through those gaps. Anything could reach through if it wanted to. I moved to the clay stove to begin cooking rice, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I picked up the blackened pot, feeling its familiar weight, trying to ground myself in routine. Just cook the rice. Just do what you do every morning. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is different, but everything was wrong. Everything was different. Through the holes in the walls, I swear I could feel attention focused on me. Not the casual glance of a passing animal or the distant gaze of a neighbor. No. This was concentrated, predatory, the way you feel when you're alone in the forest and realize something is stalking you, matching your pace, waiting for the perfect moment. I knelt before the stove, trying to measure out rice, but the grains kept slipping through my fingers. They scattered across the floor with tiny pattering sounds that seemed deafening in the pre-dawn silence. My breathing was too loud. My heartbeat was too loud. Everything was too loud, as if the universe wanted whatever was out there to hear me, to know exactly where I was. That's when the darkness shifted. I can't explain it better than that. The quality of the blackness beyond our walls changed, deepened. became somehow more solid, more present, as if the night itself had taken form and pressed up against our house. My eyes snapped to the bedroom curtain, to the doorframe beyond it, to that light switch mounted there, and in that moment, a terrible certainty crystallized in my 12-year-old mind. If that light goes out, if that switch flips off by itself, I will scream, I will run, I will abandon my sleeping family and flee into the night, and I won't stop running until the sun rises or my heart gives out. The thought terrified me even more than the presence I felt outside. What kind of coward abandons his family? What kind of son leaves his parents and siblings sleeping while he runs? But I knew. God help me, I knew I would do exactly that if the light went out, so I stared at that switch, willed it to stay on, prayed to every saint I could remember. The pot grew slippery in my sweating grip. 5 seconds passed, maybe less. Time moved strangely in that moment, elastic and thick. Then, click, the light died. Darkness swallowed the house whole, leaving only my small lamp to hold back the void. My mouth opened to scream, my throat had closed. My legs wanted to run, but my body had turned to stone. Every muscle locked rigid, because in that fraction of a second before the darkness fell, the lamplight had caught something. I saw it. Through the gap beside the curtain, illuminated for just an instant, a hand, but not a human hand, not anything that should exist in our world. It was enormous. The palm was easily the size of my entire torso, and the fingers? God, the fingers were impossibly long, each one the length of my forearm, ending in nails that curved like talons, like the claws of some massive bird, but sharper, more deliberate. The skin was shadow black, almost translucent, as if I could see through it to the bones beneath. And the bones were wrong too many joints, bending at angles that made my eyes hurt, and it was reaching for the light switch. The fingers moved with terrible slowness, savoring each centimeter, as if whatever owned that hand wanted me to see, wanted me to understand what was happening. Click, it turned off the light. In the present moment, I stood paralyzed in the darkness. The pot slipped from my nerveless fingers and crashed to the floor with a metallic clang that should have woken everyone in the house. But no one stirred. My family slept on, lost in whatever dreams occupied them, completely unaware that something impossible had just reached through the fabric of reality into our home. Then the curtain moved, not billowing, as if from wind, not swaying naturally. It moved deliberately. It bulged inward, pushed by something on the bedroom side, the side where my family slept. The shape pressing against the fabric was those fingers. I could see the outline of each impossibly long digit spreading across the material like a spider's shadow, like skeletal tree branches silhouetted against a full moon. From behind the curtain, from the room where my parents and siblings lay sleeping and vulnerable, came a sound. A long, rasping exhalation, not quite breathing, more like the sound of wind through a cave, or the last breath leaving a corpse. The hand pressed harder against the curtain. The fabric stretched. I could see the detail of those talons now, see how they curved and tapered to points sharp enough to pierce skin. They were less than 10 feet from my youngest sister's sleeping form, and then, impossibly, horrifyingly, the hand began to pull back. The fingers curled inward, retreating. The curtain slowly returned to its natural hang. But I knew, with absolute certainty I knew, it hadn't left. It was still there, just on the other side of that thin curtain. Standing in the darkness of our bedroom, standing over my family, watching them sleep with whatever eyes or senses such a thing possessed. And it knew that I had seen it. The lamp in my hand flickered. The flame danced and jumped as if trying to escape its own wick. Through all those holes in the bamboo walls, I felt that attention shift, rotate, focus entirely on me. Whatever it wasn't outside anymore. It had never been outside. It had been inside all along, in the room with my family, in the darkness where we slept every night, sharing our space, breathing our air, watching us dream. And now it knew that I knew. My paralysis broke. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything. But what came out instead was a whimper, a pathetic, broken sound that a 12-year-old boy makes when he realizes the monsters are real and they know where you sleep. The curtain swayed one more time, gentle, almost playful, and from the bedroom, in the silence between my father's snores, I heard it, the soft scrape of those talons against the wooden floor, moving, coming closer to the curtain, coming closer to me. I don't remember making the decision to move. My body simply acted, some primal survival instinct overriding my frozen muscles. I grabbed my school bag, my books, everything within reach, and I ran. Not out the door. I couldn't make myself go into that deeper darkness outside where God knows what else waited. Instead, I ran to the corner farthest from that bedroom curtain, pressed myself against the bamboo wall despite all those gaps and holes, and I waited, clutching my lamp, watching that curtain, waiting for those fingers to part the fabric and step through, but they never did. As the first gray light of dawn began seeping through the eastern holes in our walls, the presence slowly faded. Not gone. I could never believe it was truly gone, but receded, pulled back into whatever space between spaces it had emerged from. When my mother woke an hour later, she found me still crouched in that corner. Lamp burned down to nothing. Eyes wide and bloodshot, she scolded me for wasting oil, for not cooking the rice, for being dramatic. I never told her what I'd seen. I never told anyone. Because how do you explain something like that? How do you make someone believe that there are hands in the darkness? Enormous, impossible hands with talons like curved knives, and they reach through from somewhere else to turn off your lights. How do you tell your family that something shares your home, and it knows you've seen it? I thought that would be the end of it. That maybe I had imagined the worst of it, that fear had amplified a shadow into something monstrous. I was wrong. 3 nights later it came back. I woke to the sound of scratching, not the gentle scratch of a rat in the walls or a lizard scuttling across bamboo. This was deliberate, methodical. The sound of something hard and sharp dragging across wood, back and forth, like someone sharpening a blade. It was coming from the bedroom. My eyes snapped open in the darkness. Everyone else was still asleep. I could hear their breathing, unchanged, peaceful. But that scratching continued, steady and patient, and underneath it, I heard something else, breathing, deep and rattling, like air moving through a throat that wasn't made for it. I lay frozen on my mat, too terrified to move, too terrified to make a sound. The scratching moved along the wall, following the line where bamboo met wood, circling the room, getting closer to where I lay. Then it stopped, right beside my head. In the absolute darkness, I felt something hovering above me. The air grew cold, impossibly cold for a tropical night. My breath came out in visible puffs of vapor, though it was the dry season, and then I felt it. The lightest touch on my face, fingernails, those long curved talons, tracing the line of my jaw with a gentleness that was somehow more terrifying than violence would have been, like it was memorizing the shape of me, learning me. I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed, mouthed every prayer I knew without making a sound. The touch lingered for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, and then it withdrew. When I finally dared to open my eyes, the darkness had returned to normal. The cold had dissipated, but on the bamboo wall beside my head I saw them in the first light of dawn. Scratch marks, deep gouges in the wood, 5 parallel lines, each one as long as my forearm. The marks of those fingers. I tried to hide them, tried to convince myself I could handle this alone. But my mother noticed. She demanded to know what had happened, thinking perhaps I'd damaged the wall in some childish game. When I couldn't explain, she grew angry, then concerned. It must have looked worse than I thought. I hadn't slept properly in days, had barely eaten, jumped at every shadow. That night, my father decided to sleep in the main room with me, to prove there was nothing to fear, he said. To show me that old houses made strange noises and shadows played tricks on children's minds. He fell asleep quickly, exhausted from working in the fields all day. I lay awake beside him, watching the darkness, waiting. At exactly 3 a.m, the scratching began again. My father woke instantly. Even in his skepticism, his body recognized the wrongness of that sound. He sat up, reaching for the lamp. And that's when we both saw it. The curtain to the bedroom was moving, but not swaying, bulging outward, stretching, as something massive pressed against it from the other side. The fabric pulled taut, and through it we could see the outline of that hand, all 5 fingers spread wide, each one impossibly long, pressing against the curtain like it wanted to tear through. My father screamed. I had never heard my father scream before. He lurched backward, knocking over the lamp, plunging us into darkness. In that darkness, the curtain ripped, not torn from top to bottom, but punctured. 5 holes appeared in the fabric, and through them came those talons, curling inward, grasping at the air, searching for something to grab. My father grabbed me and ran. We burst through the front door into the night, and he kept running, dragging me with him until we reached our nearest neighbor's house, the Reyes family. 10 minutes away through the dark, Mr. Reyes, a policeman in the municipal station, answered our frantic pounding. My father, usually so composed and proud, was babbling, incoherent with fear. Mr. Reyes saw the terror in our faces and called for backup immediately. Within an hour, 4 policemen accompanied us back to our house. They brought flashlights, radios, even Mr. Reyes's service pistol, though what good a gun would do against something like that I couldn't imagine. My mother and siblings were awake when we returned, huddled in the corner of the bedroom, confused and frightened by our sudden disappearance. The torn curtain hung in shreds from the door frame. The 5 puncture holes were perfectly visible, each one surrounded by deep gouges where those talons had gripped the fabric. The police searched everything, every corner, every shadow, under every mat and behind every basket. They found nothing. No intruder. No animal. No explanation. But they saw the curtain. They saw the scratch marks on the wall beside where I slept, and when they shined their flashlights through the holes in the bamboo, one of them, Officer Mendoza, went pale. "There's something out there," he whispered. I don't know what I saw, but something moved, something big. They decided 2 officers would stay with us until morning. Mr. Reyes and Officer Mendoza volunteered, perhaps out of duty, perhaps out of morbid curiosity. They positioned themselves in the main room, flashlights ready, pistols within reach. My family huddled together in the bedroom. None of us slept. We just waited for dawn, praying it would come quickly. At 2:47 in the morning, I remember checking my father's watch obsessively. The lamp went out, not flickering, not dying slowly, just out, snuffed like someone had pinched the flame between their fingers. In the sudden darkness, Officer Mendoza turned on his flashlight. The beam swept across the room and froze. Standing in the corner, The same corner where I had cowered days before was a shape. I can't describe it properly because the human mind isn't made to process something like that. It was tall, impossibly tall. Its head bent at an angle to fit beneath our low ceiling. Its body was wrong, too thin, like it had been stretched on a rack. With joints that bent in places humans don't have joints. And its hands. Those hands hung at its sides, fingers so long they nearly touched the floor. In the flashlight beam, I could see the nails clearly now. Not black as I had thought. They were translucent, like dark glass, and through them, I could see what looked like veins. But the liquid inside wasn't blood. It moved like oil, black and viscous. The thing's head turned toward the flashlight, turned toward Officer Mendoza. It had no face, just smooth skin where features should be. But I could feel it looking at us, perceiving us, knowing us. Officer Mendoza fired his gun. The sound was deafening in that small space. The bullet hit the thing's center mass. I saw it strike, saw the impact, but nothing happened. No blood, no reaction. The thing didn't even flinch. Instead, it moved. I've never seen anything move that fast. One moment, it was in the corner. The next, it was on Officer Mendoza. Those hands wrapped around him, fingers coiling around his torso like serpents, and it lifted him off the ground as easily as I might lift a doll. Officer Mendoza screamed. The thing's fingers tightened, and I heard bones snap, sharp cracks like green wood breaking. His flashlight fell, spinning across the floor, its beam creating wild, dancing shadows. Mr. Reyes was shouting, firing his gun, but the bullets passed through the thing as if it were made of smoke. It wasn't smoke, though. It was solid enough to hold Officer Mendoza, solid enough to hurt him. My father pushed us toward the door, screaming at us to run. My mother grabbed my youngest siblings and fled. I was frozen again, watching in horror as one of those taloned fingers traced up Officer Mendoza's arm, almost gentle, almost curious. Then it pressed down. The talons sliced through skin and muscle, like they were water. Blood sprayed across the wall. Officer Mendoza's screaming reached a pitch I didn't know human voices could achieve. The thing cut off his finger, cleanly, deliberately. The ring finger of his left hand, severed at the base. It fell to the floor with a soft, wet sound. "Miguel, run!" My father's voice finally broke through my paralysis. I ran. Outside, chaos. My siblings crying. My mother praying frantically. Mr. Reyes shouting into his radio for help. Behind us, Officer Mendoza's screams continued, then suddenly stopped. The silence was worse than the screaming. Mr. Reyes ran back inside, weapon raised, and emerged seconds later, dragging Officer Mendoza. The policeman was alive but unconscious, his face gray with shock. His hand was wrapped in Mr. Reyes's shirt, soaked through with blood. His chest and ribcage were crushed, bones broken. But somehow he was breathing. We didn't go back inside. We huddled in the yard, in the darkness, until the sky began to lighten with dawn's approach. As the first gray light touched the horizon, we heard it. From inside the house, a sound like branches scraping against a roof, or fingernails dragging across wood. The scratching moved from room to room, circling, searching. Then it stopped. When full daylight came, the police, now a dozen of them, searched the house again. They found the blood. They found Officer Mendoza's severed finger on the floor, pale and lifeless. They found more scratch marks, hundreds of them now, covering every wall, every surface, like something had been frantically searching for a way out, or a way in deeper. But they found no creature, no intruder, nothing that could explain what had happened. Officer Mendoza was rushed to the provincial hospital. He survived, but barely. Broken ribs, punctured lung, crushed sternum. The doctors couldn't explain the severity of his injuries. The force required to break bones like that should have killed him. And his finger? They couldn't reattach it. The cut was too clean, too strange. The tissue around the wound showed signs of necrosis, as if something had poisoned it. He never spoke about what happened. Took early retirement. Last I heard, he'd moved to Manila. As far from our barrio as he could get, the police investigation went nowhere. They classified it as an animal attack, though no one could identify what kind of animal. The official report mentioned a large, unidentified predator, but I read the officer's notes years later when I was older. In the margins, Officer Reyes had written, "Not an animal, not human, don't know what, don't want to know." My family didn't spend another night in that house. We stayed with the Reyes family for a week, while my father arranged for us to move, not to another house in the barrio. We left the entire region. My father took a job 3 provinces away, in a city where the houses were made of concrete and steel, where electric lights blazed all night, where the darkness had nowhere to hide. Before we left, I went back one last time in daylight to collect our belongings. The house looked different in the sun, smaller, frailer, just bamboo and wood like any other rural home, but the scratches were still there, and the torn curtain, and the holes in the fabric. And in the bedroom, in the corner where the thing had stood, the floor was marked, 5 deep gouges where those talons had dug into the earth, as if it had been holding itself back, as if it had wanted to chase us but couldn't leave that spot, as if something had bound it to that room. I have spent years trying to understand what we encountered. I've read folklore, talked to priests, consulted with people who claimed to know about such things. The closest explanation I found came from an old woman in our new city, a Mankukulam who listened to my story with knowing eyes. "Sigan," she whispered. Or something like it, something old that shouldn't exist in our world anymore. They nest in dark places, in old houses, feeding on fear. Most people never see them. They exist just beside our reality, watching through cracks and shadows. But sometimes, when someone looks too hard into the darkness, when someone acknowledges them, she shook her head. They look back. I never woke at 4 in the morning again, never sought out that early morning silence I once craved, because I learned that darkness is not empty. Silence is not peaceful. They are full of things that watch and wait. Things with hands too large and fingers too long, with talons like dark glass and a hunger for recognition. My family never spoke about what happened. It became an unspoken agreement. We would not discuss that house. That night, the thing that should not exist. My siblings were young enough that their memories faded into nightmares they couldn't quite recall. My parents grew old pretending it never happened, but I remember every detail, every sound, every moment of soul-crushing terror. I'm 34 now, married, with children of my own. We live in a modern apartment building, 10th floor, surrounded by neighbors and streetlights and the constant hum of city life. My children complain sometimes that they want to visit the countryside. Want to see where I grew up. I tell them no. I always tell them no, because some places should be left behind. Some darkness should never be revisited, and sometimes late at night when everyone is asleep, I still check the locks on our doors. I still leave lights on in the hallway, and I still flinch when I hear scratching sounds, even though it's just the wind, or a pipe, or a neighbor's cat, because I know the truth that most people never learn. There are things in this world that exist in the spaces between what we can see and what we can understand. Things that watch us from the shadows, things that wait for acknowledgement, and once you've seen them, once you've looked directly at them and they've looked back, part of you never stops being 12 years old, frozen in terror, watching impossibly long fingers reach for a light switch. They're out there, in the dark places, in the old houses with gaps in the walls, in the silence before dawn, watching, waiting with their hands hanging at their sides, fingers too long, nails like curved glass, waiting for someone else to look too hard into the darkness, waiting for the lights to go out again,